Hi, today I'm going to be showing you how to create a template structure from scratch. The file will be available for download on my website at the end of the video, so feel free to use it as you would need to. I'm essentially going to walk you through in how to create a resume structure in Microsoft Word, and then go over a few quick tips that you could also implement into your own. And with that said, let's get started in creating a resume template. First, before we start, I always recommend that resumes are one page, and the more senior your role gets, the longer your resume will be. However, if you're applying for a junior, entry, or even a senior role, I would still recommend that you keep your resume in one page. The next recommendation is that your resume shouldn't be too fancy. This does depend on what industry you're working in. For example, if you're in marketing or graphic design, you want to make your resume a bit more fancier. However, if you're going into something like legal or finance, you want to make your resume simple and clear. And when you first open Microsoft Word, the very first thing that you want to do is go to the Layouts tab, under the Margin section, change your margins to a custom setting. I have my own preference, which is the top and the bottom at 1.27 centimeter and the left and the right at 2 centimeter. This is something that can be very easily copied, and it opens up a lot of room on your page, but it doesn't cluster it all the way to the edge of the page. The next thing that I want to do is change the font to the font that I want to use. I would always recommend you use Times New Roman or Calibri. However, I personally like Calibri, so I'll be using this. The next step is to write down your name so that the employer knows who they're looking at. So let's just make this size 18. I'm just going to bold it to emphasize my name. Now, what you'll notice here is that there's a big space between my name and the next tab. So what I actually want to do is change the spacing to 1 so that there's less space between text. And this is honestly the best default setting that you could have on your resume. After you write down your name, I'm going to switch back to font size 9. You then want to provide details of how the employer could contact you. So I always recommend first write down your address, and then write down your phone number, and then write down your email, so shinfinancials.com, and then you also have the option to write down your LinkedIn if you want to. Like this. And now you have your default setting. If you still think that there's too much space between these words, the best way that you could play around with this is under the Layout tab, you'll see indent and spacing. You can see under the after section, there's 8 points of spacing. I just want to change this to a 0. And you'll notice that the spacing gets reduced. You can now begin working on the details of your resume. Resumes have generally 3 sections. The first one is education, then experience, and then skill set. How you want to present these in which order is your preference. However, I always recommend education first, and then experience, and then skill set last. This is because you don't really want to start off with your experience right away, because you want to let the employers kind of get a gauge of who you are before they really get to know what you bring to the table. Education is a very good opener for that, and then it allows the employer to sort of take their time to get into your experience after. So let's actually set up the education section first. So write education, and I want this to be font size 14. Actually, that seems too big. Let's change this to 12. And here what you can do is you can insert a borderline. So we're just going to add a bottom border to now indicate the section as education. Now, whenever you look at resume templates, you'll always notice that you have the name of the institution and then the date at the end. However, how would you really structure this in your Word document? The way we're going to insert it is by inserting a table. So the first thing that you want to write down is the degree name. So let's call this honors Bachelor of Finance, and then write down the location. I want this to be at the other end of this page, so I'm just going to highlight this and then move this to the end. And then you want to write down your financial institution name. So let's call this Shin Financials University. And then you want to write down how long you were there for, or if it's still continuing. So let's just create a dummy date duration. Let's move this to the right as well. Now this doesn't really look pretty because there's all these borderlines. And really what you can do here is highlight the table. Under this border section, just click no border. And now you have your headers. So let's change this to font size 10. And then under you want to provide any additional details. And we're going to do that by using bullet points. So let's just say your cumulative GPA was 3.8 out of 4.0. And then you could also provide any additional details that you'd like, such as entry into the Dean's List. And now you have your education. You have the option to also put down your secondary or any professional designations. And if you're working towards a professional designation, it's actually recommended that you put it there. So let's actually copy this into the section below. And we're going to write CPA designation Canada. And let's try to work on that. So this was achieved in January 2024. And let's just copy the bullet points that we've made. And graduate diploma in professional accounting. Now that you have your education section, we can then begin working on the experience section. So you want to make sure that everything in your template is consistent. So if you already have something set up, it's not a bad idea to just copy it right down below. So instead of education, we now want to write experience. So even for the experience side, we want to follow the same template where we want to write down the name of the role first. So let's say corporate FP&A manager. And then write down the name of your company. So let's call Shin Financials. Actually, let's just call it Shin Financials Inc. And then the duration is, let's say, May 2024 to present. And then below, you want to continue again, writing down your bullet points. So this will be experience 1, experience 2, experience 3, and etc. And then if you have any other positions that you want to write, feel free to just copy whatever you had at the top. So we can call this Senior Financial Analyst. I always recommend that you write down your most recent and your most relevant experience to the job that you're applying for. So for example, if you're applying for a finance role and recently you worked in, let's say as a real estate agent, it doesn't really add that much value to put that role on the top of your list. Rather, you'd want to put an experience that's related to finance at the top of your experience list, as long as it's still somewhat recent. Some judgment calls will have to be made in terms of which experience you want to put down first. However, you want to make sure that the employer sees what they like as soon as possible. And the last section that you want to create is your skill set. Now, under the skill set section, you don't want to write too much because you want the experience to be talking for you rather than the skill set section. But if there are specific items that you want to emphasize, it is not a bad idea to list it down in this section below. Some skill sets that you can emphasize are first, professional designations, software literacies, for example, Excel, any financial softwares you've used in the past, such as Hyperion or NetSuite, and etc. And any other skill sets that you really want to emphasize. For example, financial forecasting, financial literacy, and in-depth understanding of financial services. And it really does depend on what company you're applying for. So if you're applying for a finance job in a tech company, you can also emphasize that you've had experience of working with software as a service type industries. Again, the skill set section is here to help you deliver critical information. It is not a place where you want to write any irrelevant information that really won't help you get the job. And now you have your resume template. And you also have a lot of flexibility to change the structure to how you want to present it. For example, I can see that the underline and where the text starts don't really align. So I can actually change that to kind of push them more towards an alignment. One quick tip here that I really want to share with you is that when you write down your experience, you want to make sure that you write it in a deliverable focused manner. For example, let's say that you've developed a dashboard that helps deliver insight for monthly key performance indicators. Rather than say that you've just created a dashboard that delivers KPIs, you want to say delivered key performance insights to the CFO on a monthly basis by developing a dashboard that analyzes KPI performance. In that sentence, it clearly indicates what you've delivered and who the stakeholder is, and it helps the employer easily picture you in a role if you emphasize the deliverable and the impact that it's made. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out and I'd be glad to help. Again, this file will be available for download for you to use, so feel free to download and use it as you need to. I hope this video helped you gain insight into how a resume is generally built from scratch, and it showed you some tools that you can also use to improve the quality of your resume. I'm going to be uploading more educational content going forward, so follow for more.